They're starting to hit their strides. They gear up for the playoff push. We'll have all Week 5 action coming up next. So get ready because Gridiron Glory starts right now. Well, look where we are now. It's crazy to think we're already halfway through the regular season, but guess what? We made it. And it appears y'all are making the most of it, so let's dive into all the latest in the 740. We're starting off the show with the first week of AP polls in the 2021 season. These rankings came out on Tuesday and show where the top teams in the region stand statewide. In Division 3, where Granville is only school state ranked, the Blue Aces currently are ranked 5th in the state before this week's action. In Division 4, Bloom-Carroll headlines the rankings. The Bulldogs are ranked 4th in the state after making the Final Four last season and are unbeaten, entering the Gridiron Glory Game of the Week against Amanda Clear Creek. We'll tell you how that game went on later. Waverly is next at 8th. The Tigers had a battle of the unbeatens with Portsmouth tonight. Finally, despite Heath's loss to Granville, they find themselves ranked at 16th. Next up is Division 5, where Ironton is at number 3. The Fighting Tigers have made back-to-back state title games. Ridgewood and Piketon are both led by star quarterbacks and find themselves in the top 10. Portsmouth is at number 13. You better not be sleeping on the Trojans this season. Finally, Bel Air comes in at number 16. Frye is the only school featured in Division 6. The Cadets are ranked 3rd after some marquee wins early on in the season. In the smallest division, Newark Catholic is ranked 2nd, the highest of any team in our coverage area. And guess what? Portsmouth, Notre Dame, Trimble, and Shadyside are ranked back-to-back at 7, 8, and 9. Finally, Bern Union is 11th in Division 7. The Rockets have been impressive early on in the season. It'll be interesting to see how a wild Week 5 will shake up the rankings, as many intense matchups went down, so let's get started. Carl Blaylock joins us as he traveled to Nelsonville tonight. And Carl, how did NY look?
Well, Nick, the Buckeyes were looking to continue a win streak after winning last week's game. Nelsonville-York bringing the hammer to Boston Field, and after forcing a safety on the first drive, Oak Hill had to punt on a safety kick, and Tommy Mitchell took the safety kick, found daylight on the right side, and ran it into the Oaks red zone. Then Drew Carter finished off with a QB run left into the end zone, 9-0 Buckeyes. Students are enthralled. Next Oak Hill drive, Oak Hill runs a fake punt and Brayden Howell makes the reception. However, 4 plays later, the Buckeyes defense will sack Oaks' Derek Boggs and put Drew Carter back onto the field, where Carter will take the ball and run it in from 8 yards out, 16-0 Buckeyes after 1. After a pick 6 to start the second, the Buckeyes got the dagger with this 18-yard touchdown reception to Keegan Swope. The Buckeyes roll 37-0.
It looks like the NY defense stepped up again.
Yeah, Nick, the Buckeyes held the Oaks to 0 points overall and only a handful of first downs, and it was through all 3 phases of the game. NY special team stepped up big from the opening kickoff, pinning Oak Hill inside their own 10-yard line. The Buckeyes were then able to use that great field position to force a safety after a botched snap on a punt. On the ensuing safety kickoff, Tommy Mitchell ran it back to the Oaks 17-yard line, setting up a Buckeye touchdown.
How strong was Nelsonville-York's pass rush tonight?
Their pass rush was very strong. The Oaks only had a handful of first downs the entire first half and were held to no points the entire game. Oaks quarterback Derek Boggs was under constant pressure from the NY pass rush. The Buckeyes defenders were swarming to the ball at any opportunity. Even when Boggs was able to get the ball out, the Buckeyes secondary still made the receivers' lives miserable. Jared Justice got a pick 6 of the Oaks, and the Buckeyes got multiple deflections to disrupt the Oaks passing game.
And now, did this frustration lead to any penalties for the Oaks?
Yes, but the also for the Buckeyes as well. After Justice's pick six, a post-play skirmish broke out, leading to personal foul penalties for both teams. A Buckeye bench player was ejected for leaving the bench. However, cooler heads prevailed for the rest of the game. The Buckeyes defense will look to continue their dominance next week against colder Cleveland and the Megs' high-flying offense.
Thanks, Carl. A battle of unbeatens in Week 5 is always going to be a huge game, and Waverly and Portsmouth didn't disappoint the fans that traveled to Pike County to take in a game that was added to the schedule earlier this week. Coach Crabtree has his team ready, and quarterback Wade Futhi was dealing early. He goes deep and finds his man. Futhi has been dealing all season long. Then in the red zone finds his twin brother Will Futhi. He shakes off his defender for an early score for the Tigers. Drew Rowe was getting busy for the Trojans on the other end. He makes a defender miss and gets a huge gain. Trojans would tie the game at 7. These two unbeaten squads would not go down lightly, and Futhi has the ball again. He finds number 9 Penn Morrison on the slant route to tie it at 14. Portsmouth would take a 21-14 lead on this Rowe touchdown scamper. That was the halftime score in this one that would go down all the way to the wire. And this one would go down to the final play, but Waverly scored a touchdown and converted a 2-point conversion to win this instant classic. Make sure to check out the social media for highlights of this ball game. Chillicothe hasn't seen Logan since 2019, and the two teams put on a show. Reporter Claire Geary was on site for the match.
Nick, the time between these two teams was no match for the difference made on the field. It was a neon night for the student section, and Logan and Chillicothe were bright with their plays in the first half. The Cavs' Mason Dowdy finds Xavier Doss on a 36-yard pass that sets up the blue and white for the red zone. First and goal, Dowdy hands the ball to running back Chucky Thomas for a drive up the middle, 7-0 for the Cavs in the first quarter. Top of the second, the Chieftains get to their take at a shot at the end zone with a 10-yard rushing touchdown by Trayton Poling. As a result of an interception, Logan's Braden Sturgill keeps the ball and runs the length of the field for a 51-yard touchdown to take the lead. And after a 2-point conversion, we're up 15-7 at the end of the second quarter, going into the second quarter. A successful run up the middle from Dowdy and the Cavaliers for a 2-point conversion from Lee tied the game at 15 apiece going into halftime. It was exciting to see either team explode both offensively and defensively, but ultimately the Cavs won 23-21 over the Chieftains.
And we've seen both these teams trying to get in a rhythm this season. How'd they accomplish that tonight?
Well, Nick, they accomplished this by each team defensively being strong and reading the offensive pass on pass option plays, as the defense would have coverage on the corners, leaving a hole open for the man to take advantage of.
Same goes for each team, as the blank green canvas left room for the Chieftains and the Cavaliers to have an interception recorded for themselves on the stat sheet.
Plus, Dowdy was no doubt a leader for the Cavaliers as he kept the ball moving on the ground. Both teams were efficient in their run game. For Logan, team leaders on the night were Poling and Tyler Dawson, with Dawson owning a 43-yard run on the night for the team.
Meanwhile, for the Cavaliers, moving the ball from left to right kept the Chieftains on their toes.
Not only did it keep them on their toes, Nick, but it forced Logan to keep their head on a swivel as well.
And it seems as if both teams found their groove. What's on deck for both teams next week?
For Logan, the Chieftains returned back to home for a matchup against Athens. Meanwhile, the Cavs head to the road for a game against Miami Trace.
Claire, thanks for the great coverage tonight. Back to some more MVL action, where West Muskingum Tornadoes traveled to Maysville to take on the Panthers in a matchup that didn't go how many expected. Joining me live is reporter Alex Porter, who witnessed the action go down in Zanesville.
Nick, it's the second week in a row where I have experienced the unexpected. Last week, it was John Glenn going beast mode, and this week, it was Maysville. Coming into week 5, the West Muskingum Tornadoes were undefeated and atop the MVL, but the Maysville Panthers had home field advantage and a chip on their shoulder. West M's high-scoring offense was ice cold to start the game. In fact, both teams' offensive possessions looked a lot like these two plays throughout the first half. While both squads continued to exchange possessions, Dylan Padgett took it upon himself to try and get the ball rolling for West M. He intercepts the pass from Alex Bob and gets a solid return close to midfield, but the Tornadoes would end up punting. With the possession back and Maysville driving, Alex Bob rolls out to the right side of the field and makes the running pass to heavily covered Wesley Armstead for the huge gain. Now it's said with the first score of the game as Hayden Jarrett punches the ball into the end zone from 5 yards out. As the first half was coming to a close, Jarrett had a huge run that would set up this 32-yard field goal as time expired, giving Maysville the 10-0 halftime lead, which they would eventually beat West M 31-7.
What a way to show out in Maysville. Clearly, it's been upset after upset in the MVL recently.
Well, as I've been saying, the MVL is wide open this year, so these upsets are not a surprise to me.
So we know West M was hot coming into this game. What's with the sudden, all of a sudden, 180?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, the Tornadoes are at a 4-0 start to the season prior to this game. In those 4 games, they've been displaying their multifaceted offense, with the 35 points last week against New Lex being their lowest point total in the first 4 weeks. Coming into this game, I was expecting a high-scoring output, but Maysville head coach Craig Clark and his squad had other plans. West End was shut out the entire first half, and it was because Maysville forced the Tornadoes to play their style of football.
And that sounds about right, and clearly it was the right plan for success for the Panthers. Speaking of success, did anyone stand out on the Panther squad?
Well, both Maysville and West Muskingum don't have the biggest household names, but they don't let that stopping them from going out onto the field and dominating. Clearly a huge win for the Panthers, but I can't crown a specific player on the defensive side of the ball for Maysville because their whole defense balled out tonight. As for Maysville's offense, running back Hayden Jarrett was a beast all night on the gridiron. He's hard to tackle, and he had big runs that set up huge plays. He got Maysville on the board first and set up the field goal before halftime to give the Panthers a boost heading into the locker room.
What a game from Maysville. This shows that MVL is still open for any team. Thanks for the great work, Alex. Our game of the week was a battle between MSL Buckeye powerhouses. The pit has been a tough place for opposing teams to win, as Amanda Clear Creek has a hostile environment.
The man from Galilee, he spoke to me as a voice.
Yeah, I think I got it. Can you get his hand on?
Tell that midnight rider, tell the right.
Can't hear.
But as sure as God made.
Well, we're on TV. Turn around, Jones.
The Bulldogs entered hostile territory tonight against Amanda Clear Creek. Head coach Wade Bartholomew talked earlier this week about what it's like playing at the pit.
It's going to be a big game. It's hard to win at the pit. It's a great atmosphere. It's a lot of tradition. You know, a lot of guys that, you know, come out and watch the game and really make it an atmosphere. And the walk from the locker room down is intimidating. It is. And it's because that place has tradition. I mean, those guys have understood what it's like to win a state title, be state runner-ups. And, you know, there's a lot of good teams in our league, and there's 4 of us right now that are technically undefeated. So, yes, this is a big win for us if we can in the Mid-State League standings, but it's a long road ahead, and I think there's a lot of people that have the opportunity to win this league still.
The Bulldogs have had recent trouble at Amanda Clear Creek as they haven't won there in 6 seasons. Brian Kerp was out at the game, and Brian, what was it like tonight?
Yeah, Nick, the last 4 meetings between these two teams actually belong to the home team, but tonight the Bulldogs tried to make sure that wasn't the case again. The Aces looking to hand the Bulldogs their first loss of the season and jump in the driver's seat for the Mid-State League title. The first quarter was scoreless, but in the second quarter, it's Chase Plants. He's taking the handoff, and he's going 40 yards all the way to the house for the Bulldogs. Bloom-Carroll on the board first. Plants then says, yeah, we're still number 1. The Bulldogs forced another Aces punt. Now it's KJ Benedict heaving a perfect spiral for Brandon Dodds. The Bulldogs are back in the red zone. The Benedict-Dodds connection was clicking in this one. Benedict finds Dodds in the end zone for another Bulldog touchdown. 14-0 was their score at the half. And unleash KJ Benedict once again in the second half. He finds his favorite target again, and you guessed it, it's Brandon Dodds. And there's nothing but green grass ahead of him. 56 yards, 27-0 Bloom-Carroll. The Bulldogs deal the Aces their hand of an L tonight and improve to a perfect 5-0 start with a 34-7 victory.
Well, Brian, we thought this game would be very defensive, but based off that final score, that wasn't the case.
Yeah, Nick, the first 4 games went well for both defensive units, but tonight the Bulldogs gave the Aces defense a run for their money, and quite literally too. The Bulldogs rushed for 239 yards in this one. In comparison, the Aces only had 45 yards on the ground and just 7 in the first half. Wade Bartholomew's defense limited Amanda Clear Creek to just 117 total yards, while the Bulldog offense totaled almost 400 yards. The only Aces touchdown came in the fourth quarter, and that was when BC had the JV defense on the field.
The Amanda Clear Creek offense seemed to click well last week against Liberty Union. What happened tonight?
Yeah, when I talked to Wade Bartholomew earlier this week, he said the key to success against quarterback Nate Hunter was forcing quick passes, and they executed that to a T. Last week, Hunter was given time in the pocket and was able to complete his passes. Tonight, the Bulldogs were quick to get to Hunter, and he was forced to execute the throws quickly. The Bulldogs secondary was also tough tonight. They held Hunter to just 67 yards passing.
And as we saw in your highlights just a moment ago, the connection between KJ Benedict and Brandon Dodds was unmatchable tonight.
Yeah, Nick, this dynamic duo was through the Aces through a loop. Dodds led all receivers with 129 yards and had a trio of touchdowns. While the Bulldogs have a number of talented receivers, Dodds is definitely Benedict's favorite target so far. And speaking of Benedict, he has been impressive so far this season. Tonight, he completed 15 of his 19 pass attempts for 158 yards. It is clear that the senior is a true leader on this offensive unit and has taken his game to an even higher level this fall. And the way Benedict in this offense has been clicking this season, and as always, that suffocating defense, the Mid-State League is Bloom-Carroll's to lose once again this year.
And the Bulldogs definitely have a few tough games down the stretch. It'll be interesting to see if they can secure a league title. Safe travels back to Athens, Brian and Alex. We now head to Vinton, where Jason Williams have been having a monster season. Jacob Mata talked with him and head coach Matt Kimes about his early season success.
The Warren Warriors are off to a 2-2 start 4 weeks into the season, and they are looking to keep rolling after a win in Week 4. Sophomore running back Jason Williams is a huge reason the Warriors have been able to compete in all of their games and come away with a victory in 2 of them. Jason has had an incredible start to the season. In 4 games, Jason has racked up just shy of 700 yards, and he is averaging 173 rushing yards a game. He averaged 12 yards a carry so far this season, and Jason knows exactly who is helping him gain a ton of yards on every play.
I got to give it all to the big old 5-man front, pushing everybody back, helping me get those gaps and holes so I can go score.
Jason had an amazing first game of the season against Belpre as he ran for 381 yards on 19 carries. That game was a huge help to his totals on the season, and he currently sits as the number 2 running back in Division V Ohio high school football for rushing yards. Head coach Matt Kimes knows how important a guy like Jason is, and he talked about how hard of a worker he is and how driven he is to get better every week.
He's a special football player, but not only is he a talented kid, but he's a super hard worker. He's an extra worker guy. He's a weight room guy. He's an extra reps guy, staying after. He's driven to be great.
For Gridiron Glory in Vincent, I'm Jacob Mata.
And speak of the devil, Chloe, how did Jason Williams fare against the Fort Frye Cadets?
Fort Frye certainly did their homework against the Cadets' Jason Williams because they shut him down any offensive attempts from him. The undefeated Fort Frye Cadets welcomed Warren looking for their 5th win. A name we're going to see all night long, and that is Mason Long, as he dominated for the Fort Frye offense. And we see it in his hands again as he trots his way into the end zone with less than 2 minutes left in the quarter. Fort Frye flexed their defensive side as well as we see Casey Brooker pick up the big stop. The defense gets back to work, forcing a punt from Warren into the hands of Owen Brown. Brown chooses right, and he takes it up the sidelines past the defenders before finally he is pushed out of bounds right at the Cadet 10. It's called back into the hands of the Warriors as this Cadet team struggled with penalties all night long. With that, Warren coming in hot, but Caleb Riggs forces the fumble, and the Cadets take over once again. Mason Long with the short run in, and that caps off the scoring for the Cadets in the first half.
Wow, Fort Frye controlled the whole game, it seemed like.
Yeah, for sure. From the start, it was the cadets that were clicking on all cylinders.
And talk about the penalties. How did that factor into tonight's ball game?
Well, Nick, we've seen a lot of spark coming from the cadet offense, but on their opening drive, we've seen struggles already with the team picking up a false start on their own 5. The bad luck continued for the cadets as they fumbled in the very next play. They were able to recover it, bringing them to a 4th down. They took a chance and went for it just to be sacked, giving the Warriors their first possession of the game. We've seen some errors on the other side of the ball as well. The cadets forced several fumbles that they were able to recover, which eventually led to their first score.
Warren's offense didn't seem to click this game. How did Fort Frye cause this?
Let me tell you, Nick, we got to see why this team is 5-0. It was a physical battle between these two teams, and we've seen some big hits coming from both sides of the ball. The cadet defense also forced a handful of 3-and-outs, and they didn't give Warren too many chances down the field. On the offensive side, despite the miscues, Fort Frye was able to find the end zone twice in the first half before going on to win the game 33-7.
And it sounds like the Cadets defense will be carrying them along all season as they try to continue their win streak. Thanks for the great work, Chloe. Do you want more glory? Well, check out all of our social media pages. On our website, we have written game recaps. You can find video recaps on Twitter and Facebook. All the highlights on Instagram and TikTok. Make sure to check out all of our accounts on all of our platforms. We at Gridiron Glory don't want you to miss anything. We welcome in Bryce Tinson to talk Athens versus Vinton County. How'd this one go, Bryce?
Well, Nick, the Bulldogs lead the series 15-4 all time, but the Vikings came to play tonight. It was senior night for the Vikings, and you could feel the tension in the air. The Bulldogs kick off the scoring with a Marcus Stevers kick return. Once he picks it up, it's off to the races. Stevers goes untouched down the far sideline for 6. Bulldogs will take the early lead 7-0. The Vikings had the answer as Gabe Rashke will muscle his way into the end zone, but the extra point is missed. Bulldogs will stay in the lead 7-6. They looked to extend their lead though, and they would do just that with this RPO as Landon Wheatley finds Levi Neal, who was socially distancing from the Vikings defense, all the way to the end zone. Bulldogs go up 21-12. Vinton County had yet another response. It would be because of the big hog mollies up front. Gabe Rashke takes the toss to the left, and he's got blockers. He does not get touched on this run to make it 21-18 just before the half. The Vikings would shut out the Athens offense in the second, winning 50-21.
That rushing attack for the Vikings was crazy. What was their keys to this success?
Yeah, Nick, crazy is right. They went for 496 yards on the ground tonight thanks to the big men up front. I mentioned the offensive line earlier, and rightfully so. They were the reason why Vinton County was able to dominate the game the way they did. They were on the Bulldogs' defense from the jump. In the rare instance the running backs didn't have free lanes, they were able to bulldoze through the Athens defenders. Zane Carr ran for 188 yards and a touchdown behind this impressive line. Gabe Rashke was the other benefactor of the Hogs up front. He was the star of the show, running for 233 yards and 5 touchdowns. He had all the room in the world to run, and he took advantage. He used his speed and quickness in space to make defenders miss and just plain outrun them, except on this one where he got caught from behind. On his second touchdown run of the game, he made sure not to get caught. As you saw earlier, he would waltz into the end zone with no care in the world. His runs, that's how most of his runs were in this game. He scorched the Athens defense all night long.
And that run game was impressive, but now talk about the defense.
This defense was the most impressive part of the game. They held the Athens offense scoreless in the second half. They were hitting hard all game, and Landon Wheatley found out the hard way. The Vikings defense was swarming the ball and giving the Bulldogs no room to breathe. Vinton County was living in the Athens backfield, and of course you're going to get fired up with a play like that. Flex those muscles. Wheatley is definitely going to wake up sore after this one.
And you know what?
Vinton County will travel to Alexander next week to get this win streak going and keep that running game hot, Nick.
Sorry for jumping on your toes there.
You're good.
But thank you, Bryce, for that great work. We'll see how the Vikings can get it done next week. Fans had the right read as Vinton County received 62% of the fan vote on our Instagram story. Let your voice be heard on who you think will win each game. Our fans were confident the Jackson Ironmen would defeat the Wheelersburg Pirates tonight, as 78% of our fans thought the Ironmen would come out on top. Were they right? Excuse me.
It took more than 48 minutes for us to come up with a winner on this one. Both teams were looking to bounce back from Week 4 losses. They were both at 2-2, and they were fired up. and it didn't take long for the action to get going. On the first drive, here's Wheelersburg. Opening drive of the game, Pirates ball, but this handoff ends up on the turf and Drew Bragg scoops it up and there's nothing but green ahead. He takes it into the end zone and it's 7-0 just 3 minutes into the game. But the turnover bug also affected the Ironmen. Quarterback Evan Spires has trouble with the snap, looks like he secures it, but the ball is on the ground and this time Wheelersburg is on top. And they would cash it in. Pirates running back Ethan Glover sheds a tackle and powers his way across the goal line. Game tied at 7 after the extra point. Into the second quarter, big third down, and Spires comes through. Beautiful throw to Eli Browerman, and he walks it in for 6. 14-7 Jackson, and that would be the score at the half. An injury to Spires forced Jacob Winters to quarterback. Pressure gets to him on this third down and long, and he's picked off by Eli Swords. He takes it down to the 1-yard line, and they would punch it in on the next play. It would stay tied at 14 until overtime, and Jackson takes this one by a single point, 21-20.
And Will, it doesn't get any closer than that. These teams were neck and neck for the entire 48 minutes. What was the difference in the end?
The Ironmen controlled most of the game, but a few plays kept the Pirates right in it. Penalties affected both teams, but no one player more than Cade Wolford. Wolford had 2 touchdowns brought back by holding calls, one in the first quarter and another on a long pass from Winters in the third. And Jackson didn't end up with points on either drive. Wolford finally got his due in overtime when his touchdown reception stood and put the Ironmen ahead for good. Overall, the penalties hampered both teams, putting them constantly behind the chains. It was a headache for both coaches.
Now, outside of the flags, what kept this game so low scoring?
The defensive fronts for both teams led the way all night. Jackson kept the power run game of Wheelersburg in check in large part due to linebacker Grant Maston, but the defensive dominance stood out on both sides. Wheelersburg front 7 controlled the Jackson offense, keeping the big plays in check and allowing them to hang around. Both of their touchdowns in regulation came off turnovers. This Pirates defense stood tall all game.
The Jackson defense also forced a few turnovers of their own.
The Pirates had 3 fumbles in this game, 2 in the first quarter and another costly one in the fourth. We saw the exact same thing earlier this year when Wheelersburg took on Ironton and had fumbles on 3 straight possessions, which helped put the game out of reach. As we head into the second half of the season, look for both the Ironmen and the Pirates to try and shore up the penalties and turnovers to take their teams to the next level.
I can't wait to see it. Thanks for the great work, Phil. What a night of football in Southeast Ohio. To get you all caught up, let's take a look at our final scores from games we weren't able to cover on the show. We will look to see Caldwell at Eastern. It was 29-27. Caldwell came out on top. Zanesville 48, Heath 7. As we move on to 2 other games, Trimble was able to just came down to the wire and they lost by just 1 point, 34-33. Portsmouth at Waverly, 35-34. Waverly came out on top. And those games were both great matchups and they both came down to the wire. Just make sure you follow our social media pages for highlights from these crazy games. Lots of action going down to the wire, and you won't want to miss it. So be sure to follow us on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook. So remember, there's nothing better than Friday nights and Gridiron Glory.
Support comes from the law firm of Bricker and Eckler, providing legal services in the Southeast Ohio region for energy, education, government, and business counsel. More information at bricker.com/southeast.
Support comes from Ohio Health O'Bleness Hospital's sports medicine experts, helping youth athletes and active adults recover from injury